Hello, U.S. History, and welcome to another Varela's videos. Today we're looking at more direct American involvement in the Vietnam War. So remember, we had notes earlier in class about the background. So let's pick up with we know sort of how the story of how America starts to become involved in this conflict in Southeast Asia. And remember, the name of the game at this point is still containment. So we talked about containment a long time ago when we were talking about the early parts of the Cold War. It never goes away. The Cold War is still going. And now that we have this potentially new independent country in Southeast Asia, we are worried about the spread of communism into Vietnam. It has already taken hold in North Vietnam, so that's where we're going to start our notes. Here we go. So, President Eisenhower and President Kennedy both are going to provide economic aid and military advisors to South Vietnam. And the reason why we're basically protecting South Vietnam is we are so afraid that they are going to become communist. At this point, by 1960, you have China has become a communist country in 1949. You have North Vietnam separating from South Vietnam with its defeat of the French in 1954, and it's going to also embrace communism. So South Vietnam is hoping to remain an independent slash democratic country. The problem is not everyone in South Vietnam wants that. So in 1960, a group called the National Liberation Front, NLF, is going to form. We in American history are going to refer to this as the Viet Cong. And basically the VC, the Viet Cong. These are going to be people that live in South Vietnam who are against the leader Diem, who we learned about earlier was sort of the almost like puppet leader of South Vietnam, did not treat Buddhists in Vietnam very well, was very pro-Western. So this is the group that doesn't like him. So they are pro-communism. This group is also very anti-American involvement in South Vietnam, but really in Vietnam in general. So what we're looking at here is a group of South Vietnamese residents, citizens who don't want Americans there. And unfortunately, with President Kennedy being assassinated in 1963, Lyndon Johnson is going to inherit this problem. All right, so let's move on to 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin. So what's going to happen in 1964 is a U.S. naval destroyer is attacked by North Vietnam in what's called the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam. In response to that, President Johnson wants to send a message. So he bombs every patrol boat patrol boat base in Vietnam that he can find. And this is going to lead to an act of Congress that became known as the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, because President Johnson just kind of did this. And he is the commander in chief, he is the head of the armed forces. But as you know, there are checks and balances, there are rules. So this became an interesting rule in 1964. And I'm gonna have you, I underlined it because it's actually very important and this could be on a test. So the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is basically Congress giving the president the power to do, quote, whatever was necessary, quote, to protect American interests in the region. So this would be in Southeast Asia. It does not require a declaration of war or a formal declaration of war. And I don't know if you remember when we were learning about World War II and Franklin Roosevelt, that the president has to ask Congress to declare war. That did not happen in the Korean War, and that never happens in the Vietnam War, mostly due to Congress passing this Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And you might think, well, why would Congress do that? They're doing that because they want to create a situation in South Vietnam where the military can act quickly, and this is going to allow that. So this is the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. So let's move on to some of the faces. Besides President Johnson, you have right here, this is the Secretary of State. His name is Robert McNamara. I'm sorry, Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. Here is a general that's kind of like the head general at this point, General William Westmoreland, and he will be the commander of the U.S. forces in during the Vietnam War. These are probably the two highest ranking advisors to President Johnson, and they also are responsible for many of the decisions that we're going to see made in the Vietnam War. Okay, moving on. So this is 1964 was the Gulf of Tonkin. Now we're going to move ahead to what our plan became known as. So both McNamara and Westmoreland want to, quote, Americanize the war. What does that mean? They basically are going to create a plan called Operation Rolling Thunder, and that is just going to literally bombard Vietnam, specifically North Vietnam. It will also increase our troop commitment. So this is where you start to see the draft really ramp up here in the United States. It starts in early March 1965. We start to launch a series of airstrikes that just hammer Vietnam, and we are bombing them left and right. And the idea of it being titled Rolling Thunder was to honestly shock and just show the superiority of American air strength. That was our strongest part of our military at that point, and it is going to far out surpass Vietnamese capabilities in terms of air power. But the funny thing is, this will not help us win the war. And on paper, it should. But this is where the Vietnam War is not your typical war. And it's not a typical war that America had fought before, because we're used to just sort of coming in and winning. That is not the case in Vietnam. So these airstrikes begin in 65. I will tell you they continue through 1968, so 3 years. Combined with that, we have what are called search and destroy missions, which are going to be basically kind of going through the countrysides of Vietnam, literally village to village, looking for the VC, the Viet Cong, Charlie, sometimes you hear in movies. The goal of this eventually is to win over the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. The problem is we are not winning over the side of South Vietnam, who's supposed to be our ally. In fact, there are probably more South Vietnamese siding with the Viet Cong than there are with America. And that's a problem. By 1967, we call the war a stalemate, meaning it's sort of like a draw, a tie. There's not many changes. It's just almost like it's on pause, yet it's not on pause because Americans are dying every day. What next? Well, let's go through sort of a list of the sort of positive and negatives that our American troops are seeing and the enemy that we're fighting. We'll do America first. So, American troops definitely had superior weapons. However, we are not prepared for the heat of Southeast Asia. We don't know the terrain. And now we're on the opposite side of these guerrilla warfare tactics. We're the ones that don't know what's happening. This is like the American Revolution in reverse. And this time we're like the British. We're fighting on an unknown land. We do lack the support of the group that we're supposed to be allies with, the South Vietnamese. And we call it an invisible enemy because we can't identify their enemy. The enemy. They're not wearing uniforms. They're not wearing signs that say I'm Viet Cong or I'm from North Vietnam. And so we have a really hard time knowing who is our ally and who is our enemy. And we call this indecisive battles because oftentimes it's a jungle battle, it's a jungle warfare. It's very hard to see victories. It's very small victories at best. So this is a war that we have not fought before, this type of battlefront. For the Viet Cong, they do have inferior weapons. They are using outdated weapons, old weapons. They're being supplied from China and the Soviet Union. Their weapons just aren't as good, but it doesn't matter because they avoid fighting America head on. We want to fight the Vietnamese in like these open battles. That's never going to happen. And they obviously are familiar with the terrain. This is their home country, so they know the jungles very, very well. They also have the support of many, many South Vietnamese citizens. So here's where we're fighting to protect a country that maybe doesn't even really want us there to protect them. And when I say protect, I mean keep it democratic. And at this point, maybe it's not our business, but that's not for me to decide. And again, same with the earlier, it's hard to identify. You could not have a North Vietnamese, a Viet Cong, and a South Vietnamese individual standing in front of you and tell them apart. There's no way. Plus, you can see, you probably can't see that right there. So let me move this. We're looking at the it says booby traps, BOBBY, BOOBY, booby traps and tunnels. So we're looking at um one of the most ingenious methods of fighting and navigating through this terrain is not actually on the ground, it's through the ground. And so the Viet Cong were masters at tunnel building and setting booby traps in those tunnels. So yeah, so right there, I can't, oh, there we go. I'm like, I can't move it. Why isn't it letting me move it? Booby traps, BOOBY. Okay. Um, two words I want you to be familiar with in this war, the use of napalm. And the definition is right here underlined. It's a jellied gasoline dropped in large canisters that explodes on impact. So you've seen it in movies before. It is a real thing. So it has this like orange fiery kind of glow, and it literally will just like carpet bomb wherever you are dropping it. So you can see in the second image over here, children fleeing from napalm being dropped on their village, the jungle side. Oftentimes, if American soldiers found themselves overwhelmed, airplanes would come and drop this. And this was a huge weapon. The problem is these huge weapons that America have do not help America win the war. So napalm is one important term. The second term is something different. It's called Agent Orange. I know it's like, well, wait, we just saw orange. This is actually an herbicide. So almost like a poison, like a pesticide. And it was specifically used to destroy the countryside jungles and also in a way to disrupt the food supply of the VC, the Viet Cong. So our military would spray Agent Orange to try to kill the foliage, the leaves, the trees in the jungles to make it easier to walk through. It does impact the food supply. It also impacts the water. And the idea is that you're trying to make it less dense of forests and less dense jungles. But yes, this is also going to impact the civilian population. So it also affects our soldiers. And you're going to watch a video and an assignment in class, next class that we have regarding Agent Orange. So here's the video. I'm going to play it for you on your assignment. So I'll just leave the link here. But this will explain to you some of the effects of Agent Orange and how it affects our soldiers too, and not in a good way. The rest, here's again Agent Orange, a photo of that being dropped onto the jungles. The next slides are going to be images. I'm going to be posting these slides for you to work on with an assignment in class. So along with this video, you will see them again. So I'm going to go through these just so you can kind of get some visuals of the Vietnam War. Soldiers marching, you can see the water is literally up to their waists. So yeah, it's a very different terrain than Americans were used to. More soldiers marching. This time it's a picture in color. You can see the bamboo jungles. Soldiers again, kind of, it was very typical to walk through these rivers because that you couldn't walk in the forest otherwise. So it was very common. And imagine being in wet boots and wet pants and clothes. No, no fun. No, not good. Again, dense forest. It's very hard to see around you. Helicopters oftentimes will be used to drop off soldiers, pick them up if they're in trouble. Obviously, medical helicopters to lift out wounded. Very, very common, very big part of the Vietnam War. And then here's another part we don't talk about very often, the civilian impact. Here are some civilians, some villagers hiding with some soldiers behind them, and they're just literally trying to escape the battle. Again, more helicopter pictures, and you can see how dense the jungles are. You can't see ground, you just see trees. So I'm going to leave our notes here. Again, we still have a few more notes in terms of what happens with the Vietnam War, but overall, I hope you enjoyed it, and this might be our last video notes for now, so hope it was a good one. See you in class, U.S. History.